Hello, everybody. This is MCOMZ, and I'm here in Nashville, Tennessee with my buddy. You guys know who this is, the good doctor, Tdka, Kilimanjaro. And what we're going to do real quick is this will be an extended version of notes from the Art of Leadership book. And I promise you guys that volume number 5 would be corrupted leadership. I did European leadership last time. We're going to be talking about corrupted African leadership. And I'm going to read from the book, Art of Leadership. And we're going to go to chapter 9, pages 92 to 93. The blind cannot lead the blind. So bear with me real quick. There's only going to be one paragraph, though. Page 92. As in all types of leadership, ego leads the way as the conduit to imminent failure. Don't get it wrong, though. A healthy ego can also just as easily be the conduit to very effective, efficient, and successful leadership as well. So how do the scales negatively tip towards unbalance? Groupthink can be described as the number one reason for corruption. It is often convenient for these leaders to surround themselves with people who think alike and continually corroborate and authenticate said behavior. That's why it's easy to see how dogmatic influences can be placed under this description. The usual schisms of the lack or loss of self-awareness and short-term focusing for the sake of an idea or belief are indicated. Dogmatic indoctrination will also lead to prioritizing these personal beliefs over the needs of those they serve. And in this case, we're talking about the African community. Therefore, the corrupted decisions will be detrimental to the group. So we're gonna recap that section right there that I just read. But before we do, I want to let Tdka chime in. I think, well, first of all, that chapter kind of says everything. You really don't have to really break that apart and break it down. It is what it is. But leadership has changed and evolved. And I want to put this up for an example. This magazine called The Black Scholar. This was formed and created by Nathan Hare. We talked about him a couple of episodes back. And in this book, in this publication, which was number 4, volume 4, January 1973. And we got some notable names in here: Eldridge Cleaver, Nathan Hare, Howard Brown, Howard Moore, James Blackwell, Jack Daniel, David Graham Du Bois. Is he related to anybody?
I don't know.
Okay. Elizabeth Gant, Marie Hogg, Lemuel L. Henderson Jr., Adam David Miller, Joseph Scott, and Dempsey J. Travis. I bring this up for a reason. And me and Tdka talked about this earlier. Reason why we have corrupted leadership is because people cannot get out of romanticizing the past. Does the past have value? Of course it does. But we need to understand that any kind of corruption is not the kind of thing that we need in today's times. A leader, a responsible leader, a responsible African leader needs to get beyond thinking 40, 50, 60, 70 years ago and think about what we need to do right now in this day and time. We can have many examples of that. But I'll let Tdka recap what I just said in your own words. What do you think of what I just said?
Well, hello everyone. The part that stands out to me about this issue of corrupted leadership is clearly the fact that we're not improving over time. We're getting worse. And so when you're not building on the successes of the past, you put yourself in a position where everything that you're doing is pulling you backwards. So what I guess I would tie into is the statement of what is the standard, the opposite of corrupted leadership. And I do think that it starts with the system that produces, we're talking about over the weekend, this past weekend, that produces a leader.
Right.
And if you don't have a structure in place, a curriculum for the young person to go through, some type of basic training early on to prepare them for that curriculum, and then a system of training reflective of that curriculum, and then later on, a way in which to test them to ensure that they're getting the nutrients and ideas that you want them to get, and then essentially a way in which to put them in a practical situation where
Right.
they apply what they learn. If you're not doing that, you're actually ending up with individuals that are unprepared to take leadership in the first place.
Right.
So I think that's what comes out of, and then you add to it that whatever temple system that we've had in place, and usually it's a church or a mosque or synagogue and some other thing that we got from the enslavers, the person that ends up in a leadership role may be internally lacking in integrity in the first place.
Exactly.
So, it's a playground for them. It ends up being a playground for them.
Yeah, I mean, I've asked the question, what has leadership changed? Has it evolved? And I put a lot of things haven't changed. I mean, we're still a nation. When I say nation, I'm talking about the African community. We're still a nation that's in debt, terrible debt. We've now succumbed to this credit value system of capitalism. We're using credit cards more than ever, just like anybody else that lives here. The national debt that falls into delinquency is like 3.2%. And I'll just throw this number out here for y'all. Household debt nationwide, not just the African community, is 17.80 trillion. 17.80 trillion. So the 3.2% of that is 569 billion, which means that once it goes into delinquency, that's all bank money and financial institution money. 500. So this is the scheme. This is the scam, putting you in delinquency, getting you not being able to pay your bills and your debts. Mortgage loan debt, 12.52 trillion nationwide. That's just not the African community, but it gives you an idea of where we're at. 3.2% of that in delinquency comes out to 400 billion. That's astronomical numbers. And auto loans, $1.14 trillion, 3.2% of that nationwide, 36.48 billion. So these guys are literally going to the bank. The bank is going to the bank. You know what I mean? So why have we not gotten out of this issue, this situation that we're in? Who do we know that can be said was the model leader? Let's go back 20, 30, 40 years if you want to, but I can not that far back. Why do people think Barack Obama was such a great president, African leader? I don't get that part. He always, his famous quote was, "I am not the president of Black America." He said that. In Angola, in Africa, we have plenty of situations over there and people over there that we can look at. The president of Angola, Jose Eduardo dos Santos, ruled since 1979. He ain't going nowhere. You think that's a model of good African leadership? And then we talked about, Tdka and myself talked about Robert Mugabe in Zimbabwe and the circumstances that he posed there. died at the age of 95, and we already know what the situation was with his family, his wife, his kids, and how they enriched themselves. What about the Congressional Black Caucus? They came out of the civil rights era, the riot era, the civil rights era. They came out of that era because there was a need for them. What are they doing now? Have they evolved? Have they evolved? I think the answer to that is no, they have not. And then, of course, you have, institution of incarceration. So this is where we're at. I mean, we need to really look at our leaders in a very critical eye in order for us to move forward and come up with a plan, a plan of not only for nationhood and sovereignty, but fiscal responsibility. You want to recap and just finish that off with
Yeah, well, again, we talked about this before. I have nothing with this sovereignty stuff. It's just imaginary to me. You're underneath these people. You're in the country that they're in charge of. You don't have any sovereignty. You don't have any chance of it here. Around the world, we're in a situation similar to here. These people are in charge of all the mineral resources that come out of these countries. So they're in charge of the economies and therefore in charge of the people there. So we're actually daydreaming when we're talking about this sovereignty stuff. And I don't daydream.
yeah.
And so you brought up these democratically elected leaders in these different African countries, and you even brought up Barack Obama as a leader of the United States, and he wasn't the president of black people. You said that he wasn't. He
Right.
was elected by mainly whites. The vast majority of the people who have historically elected presidents in this country have always been white. Essentially 72% of the electorate. So they're going to be white. And so the platforms are going to be white. Let's be honest. I mean, the thing about us is our people is we do a lot of daydreaming. So whatever platform, whether it's Republican or Democrat or Independent, it's going to be white. And you're going to be thrown in to vote to serve as the percentage that get one of the groups over. Okay? So don't go in there daydreaming. How are they going to put reparations on the board when you know no whites are going to vote for it? I mean, it's daydreaming. Talking about sovereignty, that's daydreaming. Okay? So the whole issue of leadership is being brought up. Leadership under what society? Under what institution? Under what environment? That's the question. What environment? Are you talking about leadership of the United States? You're not in the leadership of anything. You're talking about leadership of Africa? These whites and Arabs are over us. Now, leadership of our own institutions is another question. And this is what I would be talking about. Is setting up a system, as I said earlier, and we're summing it up, that allows us to vet young people, put them in a position where they get some basic training in leadership, and then have a curriculum we send them through after they pass basic training that allows them to be taught in such a way and trained that allows them to pick up the fundamentals of leadership. After you put them in that environment, you move them to a point where they get tested. There's a testing system to see if they did accrue the knowledge that you prepared for them and they internalized it. And from the testing system, we even talked about this, just like a medical doctor gets residents. They don't just send you out to start carving on somebody. If you're a surgeon, you work on cadavers.
Mm-hmm.
You don't just start on working on regular people, cutting them up. You get practice. It's called a residence. So you take these young leaders in some way and send them through a residence that obviously is chaired and overlooked and monitored by quality leaders. And so in the final analysis, that is what we would do to put them in our institutions. and prepare them for our institutions. But if you prepare them for the Congressional Black Caucus, that's a handkerchief head institutions that the whites allow you to have.
Exactly.
And so they're going to end up with the lacking in quality. Anyway, you can't have substance in institutions where the whites are over you, telling you what to do, paying you.
That is true.
Yeah, they're paying you, telling you what to do, and actually withdrawing your pay
Right.
when you don't do what they tell you to do. So closing, it's depending on the institution we're setting up. If we're setting up our own, we've got to be sober. We can't be delusional. We got to put ourselves in the position to actually set up a structure to prepare leaders. And that is what I would say.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. And I guess just to add more meat to the bone, when I brought up the part about Barack Obama saying that he was not the president of Black America, that was exactly the point I was trying. You made a much more cogent point than I did. And that Kamala Harris also said something to that effect, that she's not going to be, the president for Black people, because she can't be. She has to be the president for everybody. And, these are institutions that are not controlled by us, the parties that we're not in controlling situations with. And then when you're talking about the Congressional Black Caucus, it came out of the Civil Rights Movement, but still, the control is still Congress.
Yeah.
So anything they might want to run through Congress as a bill or a measure in fact of law still has to be voted on by the rest of the Congress.
Let me give you an example.
Okay.
I was in Detroit when John Conyers, for almost 30 years, ran this hustle, I called it, for reparations.
Okay.
He rose to the top as one of the top House of Representative leadership members. And he never could get anything about reparations out of committee.
Out of committee.
He couldn't even get it out of committee with his own friends. And you knew when it hit the floor,
Right.
it was not going to be voted on by these whites.
Right.
And so he did that to keep getting in office for almost, it was over 30 years. He kept getting voted to
Right.
Congress from his district. So I say all that to say it was delusional in the first place.
Right.
Because the whites are not voting for that.
Right.
You see? So you can tell somebody where you stand on reparations. It's impossible to move past the whites. They're not giving you anything.
Right.
They won't even give you free tuition to go to school. What makes you think they're going to give you reparations?
Yeah, that's
so
true.
I say all that to say, John Conyers did that for 30 years. Go look it up.
Yeah.
He was Mr. Reparations Man.
Yes, he was.
He was.
Yes,
and
he
I
was.
was in Detroit when he was running that hustle. So I say all that to say we've got to get sober. And
Yeah.
we haven't done that. We're not sobered ourselves to the situation we're in. We have to prepare ourselves to move out of this.
Right.
And so everything we should be doing is building our own internal institutions.
Very
We
good.
should be producing our own internal leadership.
Right.
You see, not leadership that someone else is producing.
Right.
Yeah, monitoring and molding. They mold Obama.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
we didn't mold him.
No. Yeah, I mean, one last point.
Yes.
And you well, my mind always works overtime when you talk. My mind is all these concepts run in my mind. But I think this is important to bring up. The act, the Higher Educational Act, the Minority Act of admissions for the colleges and the universities, that they killed that. So there's no more quota for hiring, for bringing the minorities into the colleges, as it was as a statute before.
Yes.
There's no more requirement for that.
Yeah.
Now, have we always used that as a vehicle to get into the upper institutions? To a certain extent, we did, because most of the time we wouldn't have gotten there in the first place.
They wouldn't let us in.
So when the time came, when the opportunity came, when the Supreme Court has changed with the new hires and appointments, now there was opportunity now to take that out. Same thing with the what they call reproductive rights.
Okay, yeah.
Same thing, reproductive rights. Now the time is right for them to make those changes, and we're starting to see that now. So it is important that we know who controls the Congress, know who controls the Supreme Court,
Yes.
and the ones who are the president, who have been approved by the European hierarchy, they're going to do what they've been told. Bottom line, that's just the way it is. You know, so so yeah, we have a problem. I guess the bottom line is that corrupted European leadership and corrupted African leadership is basically the same thing. There's no difference. We have to learn as Africans. We have to mold our own leaders. We had to rear and educate our own leaders, and that starts at a very young age.
Yes.
So let's start. That's the key. That's the key that unlocks the door for us.
Starts at a young age, and you have a system to process them through.
Right.
An assembly line.
Right.
Of sorts to process them through.
I would suggest, before we close, I would suggest anybody who's looking at institutions of a new type and looking at how we can do that, how we can mold leaders. This book on organization by our friend right here, University of Cambridge Press, Guiding Principles of Organization in the Period of African Renaissance. A lot of your answers are in here.
Yeah.
I would suggest getting this book.
I appreciate that plug, because clearly I'm not saying anything outside of that when I tell you that we are daydreaming.
Right.
With a lot of
you actually say that.
We're just daydreaming.
Yeah.
Yeah. And get mad at people when the stuff doesn't happen, when it's not going to happen.
Right.
The only things that are going to happen are the things that we control.
Right.
And if we control them, we should be making them happen.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. With that, we're going to let you go. I'll see you again. I don't know if I'll be with my friend here, but I'll see you again on the next version of Notes from the Art of Leadership. Having said that, Abibifahodie, take care.
No tap.